If Judge Eleanor Vance had headed out maybe 10 minutes sooner that morning, she probably wouldn't have ended up in Officer Marcus Thorne's sights at all. He must have thought he'd caught someone big, a car thief maybe. What he actually found was a superior court judge. It was a clear Tuesday, no bad weather, nothing to really distract you. Just a regular highway in Napa, California, the sun already bright in the sky. Judge Vance was in her usual court attire, a charcoal gray pantsuit, her hair pulled back neatly, just how she liked it. She was driving her graphite Acura, a 2021 model, staying in the right lane, going over her day in her head. Had to get those sentencing reports done before 1 p.m., then a meeting with the district attorney around 4. If things went well, she figured, she might even get home for an early dinner with her husband. But all that calm just vanished when she got to the corner of Elm and Oakwood. Suddenly, there were those flashing lights in her rear view, red and blue. A quick burst of the siren, just enough to get her attention. She took a quick look in the mirror, a little puzzled. She knew she wasn't speeding, hadn't drifted out of her lane, and her phone was put away. Even so, she put her signal on and pulled over to the side of the road. Her heart started to beat a bit faster, not really from being scared, but more from knowing how these things can go. She got her wallet, took out her driver's license, the car's registration, and her judicial ID card. She laid them all out clearly on the dashboard so they'd be easy to see. Then, hands back on the steering wheel, fingers spread out right where they could be seen. The officer walked up to her car, quick and purposeful. He looked like he was in his early to mid-30s, tall, white, with a badge that still looked pretty new. He had that kind of stride, like he felt that uniform meant he had a point to make. License and registration, he said. Didn't say good morning, didn't tell her why he'd pulled her over. They're right here on the dashboard, officer, Eleanor said, keeping her voice steady and polite. May I reach for them? Just get them, he replied. He didn't even glance at the papers when she passed them over. Not at first, anyway. His gaze stayed on her face for a moment, then moved to her clothes, then to the steering wheel. This your car? He asked. She just blinked. It is. He finally looked at the license, then back at her. You're saying your name's Eleanor Vance? I didn't say it, no, she replied. But it's right there on the license. There was a pause, then another. Would you mind stepping out of the vehicle for me? The way he asked it was flat, no reason given, just one of those vague orders that people like her knew they had to read carefully. I'm not quite sure I follow, she said, trying not to sound like she was challenging him. Is there some kind of problem? You fit the description of someone involved in a car theft that was called in about 15 minutes ago, he stated. She felt her stomach clench, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something colder. This is my car, officer. I have the registration right here in my identification. You can call dispatch. They can confirm both. I said step out of the vehicle. She didn't budge. A couple of people out for an early walk on the sidewalk had started to slow down. Across the road, a young guy had his phone up, like he was filming. That didn't seem to make Officer Thorne any calmer. If anything, he seemed to get even more rigid. Sir, she said, her voice very even now, you're making a mistake. I'm Judge Eleanor Vance, Sonoma County Superior Court. This car is mine. It's registered to me and my husband. He briefly looked down at her ID card, and his mouth sort of tightened. Anyone can get a fake badge. Seen that plenty of times. I really think you should confirm it with dispatch before this goes any further. But the officer's hand had already gone to the clasp on his holster. His hand just hovered there, and you could almost feel the tension in the air. This wasn't just a simple mix-up anymore. It felt like he was daring her. And if Eleanor figured her official position would protect her, well, the next few minutes were about to show her just how wrong she was. It's strange how in moments like these, everything seems to get so quiet. Cars might be going by, people might be standing around, but it's like the whole world just holds its breath. Judge Vance kept her left hand on the steering wheel. Her right hand was resting on her leg. Her voice didn't shake, but her jaw was tight, and you could tell she was feeling the pressure building inside. Officer, I'm asking you one more time. Please just confirm who I am with dispatch. But Officer Thorne wasn't giving an inch. The side of his mouth twitched a little, not a smile, more like he was annoyed. His hand didn't really move, but it stayed right near the weapon on his hip. I gave you an order. Step out of the vehicle, now. She still didn't move. Instead, she asked, quite calmly, am I being detained, officer, or am I free to leave? His silence was all the answer she needed. Behind him, a woman holding a Pete's coffee cup had stopped on the sidewalk. "She's a judge," the woman called out. "I recognize her. That's Judge Vance from Channel 12. The officer just barely turned his head. "Ma'am, please keep moving." Eleanor took a slow, deep breath. She reached for her judicial ID again and held it out the window. Her fingers were shaking now, not with fear, but it was like she just couldn't believe this was happening. "This badge," she said, "was issued by the state of California." "Look," Eleanor said, "if you genuinely think I've done something wrong, I'll absolutely cooperate. But you're blowing this way out of proportion. It shouldn't have even begun." He finally just grabbed the ID card from her, gave it a hard look, frowned, and still, he didn't seem convinced. "You said this car is yours, that right?" "Yes," she confirmed. "Well, I checked the license plate. It's registered to Vance, all right?" She almost let out a laugh but caught herself. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye and said, very deliberately, "That would be my husband. We've been married for 28 years. If you'd bothered to look a little deeper into the DMV records, you'd see both our names listed." His eyes just seemed to get narrower. "So what you're telling me is some man bought this fancy car and just decided to put your name on it too?" "No," she corrected him. "I'm telling you we bought this car together. Joint bank account, joint title. You know, like married couples often do." From the sidewalk, another voice piped up. "You're making a fool of yourself, officer." But Officer Thorne, he just wasn't having it. Or maybe he heard, but he wasn't about to listen to anyone telling him something he didn't want to believe. Then just like that, he reached for her car door handle. That's when Judge Vance hit the lock button. "Do not open my door," she stated firmly. "I haven't agreed to any search or seizure." "You're obstructing," he snapped back. "I'm asserting my rights," she replied. He took a small step back, his lips pressed tight, and then he was on his radio. "Got a 1031, possible stolen vehicle here. Driver's not complying, requesting backup." Well, that got even more people looking. More cell phones popped up. Eleanor just stared straight ahead, her hands back on the wheel. Her voice then dropped, so quiet you could barely hear it. "This isn't really about the car, is it?" He didn't answer. "This is about how you're looking at me." Still silence from him. "This is about what you assume when you see someone who looks like me driving a car like this, in a neighborhood like this one. Nothing." Then even more quietly, she added, "But I won't be intimidated out of my rights, officer. Not today. Not ever." His jaw just tightened. You could hear a siren whining off in the distance. Help was coming for him. But this whole thing, it wasn't just a routine traffic stop any longer. It had become about pride, about power, and that awful feeling when neither side wants to be the one to back down. Maybe 3 minutes went by, perhaps 4. It felt like an eternity. Eleanor didn't even blink when the second police car pulled up, tires making that crunching sound on the gravel by the roadside. A younger officer got out, Hispanic, looked to be in his late 20s, and he seemed to have a gentler way about him. He looked at her, then over at Thorne, then at the small crowd that was gathering. "Thorne, what's the situation?" the younger officer asked. "Possible 1031, Thorne mumbled, kind of nodding towards her Acura. "She's refusing to get out of the car, says she's a judge, claims the car belongs to her." The new officer came a bit closer to her driver's side window. His eyes went to the ID card still clutched in Thorne's hand. "Hold on," he said, looking back at Thorne. "This is Judge Vance. I know who she is. She was the judge on that big burglary case down in Stockton about 3 weeks back. You remember? The one involving the school?" Thorne just shrugged. "Could be a fake. I seriously doubt that." So, Eleanor didn't say a word. She just let them talk. She wanted them to actually hear what the other was saying, because this wasn't about her trying to prove anything anymore. It was about them finally seeing what was plain as day all along. The younger officer, his name tag read Ramirez, turned back to her. "Judge Vance, I am truly sorry you have been stopped this way. Would it be all right if I called the station to verify your credentials?" "Please do," she said, her voice calm. "And while you're at it, maybe confirm who owns the car too." Ramirez nodded, stepped a little way off, and started talking into the mic on his shoulder. All this time, Thorne just stood there. His face didn't look angry. It didn't look confused either. It was something worse. Almost like he was desperately trying to figure out how he could possibly smooth this over without looking bad. "Why didn't you just tell me who you were when I first asked?" he muttered, almost to himself. Eleanor turned her head slowly to look at him. "I didn't think I needed to state my job title just to be treated like a human being." That landed with more force than any shouting ever could. A man in the crowd who'd been filming the whole thing called out, "She's handling this a heck of a lot better than I would. I can tell you that. A few other people nodded in agreement. A mother pushing a baby carriage whispered something to her little boy and moved across the street to watch from under a shady tree. You could feel the mood shifting. The tension wasn't gone, but it was definitely changing. Ramirez came back. Confirmed, he said. She is Judge Eleanor Vance. The vehicle is registered under both her name and her husband's. Thorne didn't say anything. Do you still need her to get out of the well? Ramirez asked, glancing over at him. Thorne's lips kind of opened, then closed again. It was like his pride was just too much for him to swallow. Eleanor unlocked the door herself then and stepped out of the car. Not because anyone told her to, but because she felt the people watching deserved to see her stand there, dignified. She didn't yell. She didn't swear. She didn't fall apart. She just looked Officer Thorne right in the eyes and said, "You stopped me because I didn't fit your idea of who should be driving this car. That's not doing your job. That's profiling." He didn't answer. Ramirez, probably sensing things were about to get even worse, gently stepped in. "Judge Vance," he said, "again, I am so sorry. If you want to file a formal complaint, I can give you the department's contact information." "I know the phone numbers for complaints," Eleanor said, "but I have a feeling this video footage will say a lot more than any official paperwork ever will." She glanced around at the people watching. There were more than a dozen of them by now. Their cameras were still pointed her way. The air was heavy. You could cut it with a knife. "It's all right. You can all stop recording now," she told them. "I'm not physically hurt. I'm not falling apart. I'm just going to be late for court." But you know, the harm was already done. The real issue wasn't about whether she'd be okay. It was about what this whole mess said about the very people who are supposed to protect and serve everyone, not just folks who look a certain way. As Eleanor started walking back to her car, the small crowd kind of made a path for her. Some just nodded, quiet-like. You could hear others whispering amongst themselves. A woman in hospital scrubs mouthed the words, "I'm so sorry," as Eleanor went by. She didn't say anything back. She didn't really need to. Just her being there, her composure, it said more than words ever could. But Officer Thorne, he still hadn't budged. He was just standing there by his police car, staring down at the pavement, his hand resting on his belt. He looked like a kid who'd been caught red-handed and had no idea what to do next. Officer Ramirez walked over to him and started talking in a low voice, but not quite low enough for others not to hear. "You really need to write this whole thing up. She's definitely going to report it. We all saw what happened here." Thorne's jaw muscle twitched. "I was just following protocol." "No," Ramirez countered. "You were following a hunch. And your hunch was dead wrong. Eleanor could have just gotten in her car and driven away then. She had every right, but something made her stop for a second before she opened her car door. She turned around and looked back. "Officer Thorne," she said, her voice calm, but with a definite weight to it. "Have you ever, just once, been mistaken for a criminal simply because of the way you look?" He looked up, clearly taken aback. "No," she said with a slow nod. "I figured as much." And that was all. No big speech, no dramatic scene. It was just like holding up a mirror to him at the worst possible moment. She got into her Acura, closed the door, and just sat there for a moment, taking a breath. Not because she was scared, but because she knew exactly what was coming. Phone calls, official statements, the media sniffing around for a story, and worse, people trying to twist what happened into some political football instead of seeing it as a real problem that needed fixing. As she finally pulled away from the curb, the crowd started to break up, the tension kind of dissolving into the warm Napa air. But one thing stuck with everyone. Every single person who was there, they'd remember what it felt like to see someone with authority, education, a totally clean record, still get treated like she was a common criminal. Back at the police station, Thorne was at his desk, typing out a report, his fingers hitting the keys like a robot. Chief Miller, a black man in his early 60s, known for being tough but fair, walked into the office. He was holding a printout of the first alert about the traffic stop. "Judge Vance?" Thorne looked up. "Yes, sir." Miller pulled up the chair opposite Thorne and sat down. No shouting, no slamming files on the desk, just direct eye contact. "I went to law school with Eleanor," he said. "Did you know that?" Thorne didn't say a word. She was top of her class. Could have gone into corporate law, made a fortune, but she chose to come back here to serve her county, and you pulled her over because... Why? Because she didn't look like someone who should be driving an Acura in your mind. I had a bolo out on a stolen car, Thorne mumbled. Don't even try that with me, Thorne, Miller said, his voice sharp. We both know that's not what this was about. Thorne looked away. Miller leaned in a bit. Did you ever stop and ask yourself why you just assumed she was lying? Even when all her documents were perfectly in order and her ID was legitimate. Still nothing from Thorne. The chief stood up. You're going to finish that report. Then you're going to take a few days of leave. And when you get back, we're going to have a serious talk about retraining. If there's still a spot for you beer. Thorne's face got beet red, but he didn't argue. He just finally nodded. Out in the station parking lot, Officer Ramirez stood by his own car, watching the sun start to set behind the county courthouse. He sent a quick text to his wife. Late again, so sorry. Then he looked back at the police station. He didn't know Judge Vance personally, not really, but he'd seen her in court enough times to know she treated everyone fairly. Didn't matter their background. And that day, she'd handled herself with more grace than most people could have pulled off. But even as things started to calm down, one hard truth was just hanging in the air. Being respectable, having status, it doesn't make you immune, not when someone's bias is screaming louder than the actual facts. By the time Eleanor got to the courthouse, she was 45 minutes late. Her assistant, Leo, a thin fellow with glasses who always seemed to have a notepad in his hand, met her right at the entrance, his face a mask of worry. Judge Vance, are you all right? She just nodded, didn't even break her stride. I'm fine, Leo. Start moving the 10:18 hearing to the afternoon schedule and see if you can push the 11 Bellwether case to tomorrow, if the defense attorneys don't have an issue with it. Leo hesitated for a second, walking quickly beside her. I saw something online. It's already spreading like wildfire. She stopped for a brief moment. A video? He nodded. Let it spread, she said. The world needs to see what power looks like when it gets challenged for no good reason. Courtroom 3A was quiet when she walked in. Her black robe was waiting on her chair. She put it on slowly, tying the belt around her waist, almost like it was a piece of armor. The bailiff seemed to stand up a bit straighter when he saw her. The lawyers in the room all rose. One man on trial whispered something to his public defender, gesturing towards her. Eleanor walked up to the judge's bench and took her seat. Good morning, she said, her voice perfectly even. Let's proceed. The court reporter's fingers started flying across the keyboard. Through case after case, she kept her attention sharp. It was easier to focus than to let her mind wander. Still, in the breaks between legal arguments, thoughts did creep in. Not about Officer Thorne, but about what that video meant for every young girl who saw it. Every girl dreaming of being a judge or anything else she wanted to be. During a recess, she found herself alone in her chambers, nursing the same lukewarm coffee from hours ago. A knock on the door snapped her back. It was Leo again. There's someone here, says he's from the mayor's office and wants to speak with you. Eleanor put the coffee cup down. Send him in. A man, tall, gray suit, probably early 40s with a calm way of speaking, entered. Judge Vance, I'm Ethan Doyle, Chief Policy Advisor to Mayor Thornton. I came over as soon as we got confirmation about what happened this morning. She gave a slight nod. I appreciate that. He sat down, choosing his spot carefully. We are profoundly embarrassed. And frankly, we're also worried. This video footage is going viral incredibly fast. The mayor was hoping you might consider issuing some kind of public statement. Eleanor leaned back, her expression hard to read. You want me to tidy this up for you? No, that's not what I intended at all. You want me to soften it, she stated, her voice flat. Make it less uncomfortable for the department, easier for the city. He paused. We simply want to prevent any more tension. She just looked at him for a moment, then asked, why do you suppose it caused tension in the first place? He had no answer. It's because people saw something they have always known was true. Only this time they couldn't just brush it aside. This time it involved a judge. In the middle of the day, no sweatshirt, no running away, no misunderstandings, just a black woman. And that's the reason people are upset. Doyle shifted uneasily in his chair. I won't be standing in front of any cameras just to make others feel more comfortable, she told him. But I'll tell you this much. I am not going to let this go. If I stay silent, I become part of the problem. He nodded slowly. Understood. A simple glance from her was his dismissal. After he was gone, she looked at a framed picture on her desk. It was her and Samuel, beaming outside their first home, nearly 25 years earlier. That was back when they genuinely believed that just working hard would guarantee success. She murmured to the quiet room, Some things really haven't changed much at all. But this situation wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what others would take away from seeing who she was and how quickly all of that was dismissed the second she was behind the wheel of that particular car on that particular street. 3 days on, the video had been shared over 5 million times. Morning news shows kept replaying clips with bold headlines like "Judge profiled by officer" and "Justice meets injustice roadside." Local papers were full of opinion pieces. Civil rights lawyers were referencing it in interviews. College instructors were even using it as a case study in their classes. But back at the Napa Police Department, the atmosphere was a far cry from public fury. It was more subdued, heavy. Officer Marcus Thorne found himself in a meeting room with internal affairs. His uniform jacket was draped over the chair next to him. He'd been put on administrative leave with pay for the time being. Across from him, Lieutenant Sarah Bellwether was going through his report sentence by sentence. She showed you her ID. She gave you her registration. She clearly told you who she was. You decided to disregard all of that. Why? He just stared at the wall past her, fiddling with the edge of his notepad. I've made similar stops before. She leaned closer. And how many of those individuals were 54-year-old black women holding a government ID that identified them as a judge? He remained quiet. This is a serious issue, Marcus. Not just for you. It's a problem for all of us. He finally looked down. I didn't intend for it to escalate like that, he mumbled. Things just got out of control. Lieutenant Bellwether let out a sharp breath. You were given a badge, an authority. That doesn't mean you can't make mistakes. It means you are responsible. That single word landed heavily. Responsible. Later that afternoon, Chief Miller held a press conference. He stood at a podium, hands clasped, no notes in front of him. What happened to Judge Eleanor Vance was completely unacceptable. This wasn't some random one-off event. It was the consequence of a pattern that too often isn't addressed. That stops today. Reporters immediately started shouting questions. Was Thorne fired? Would criminal charges be filed? Miller only confirmed what he was legally able to. But one thing was absolutely clear. The entire city was paying attention, and so was Eleanor. She was in her living room that evening. No judge's robe, no courtroom, just her, barefoot, exhausted, but definitely not broken. Samuel handed her the TV remote. Want me to turn this off? No, she said. Let it play. The voice of the news anchor was coming from the TV. While the department is now under heavy review, Judge Vance herself has not yet spoken directly with any reporters. Those close to her say she's concentrating on her judicial duties and the important discussions this whole event has brought up. Eleanor turned to her husband, Samuel. You know what the truly hardest part of all that was? He just shook his head. It wasn't him pulling me over. It was the sudden realization that after all I'd achieved, all the schooling, law, all the struggles, finally making it to the bench, I still had to somehow prove I even had a right to be driving my own car. But this was bigger than just one traffic stop or one officer now. It was about a whole system and how its flaws really show when someone finally stands firm and refuses to be made small by it. The very next week, Judge Vance walked into a crowded hall at Napa State University. She hadn't intended to make any public appearances, but when the university's Black Law Students Association invited her to their discussion on systemic bias, she agreed right away. No media, no formal speeches, just a circle of simple folding chairs. Students in their everyday clothes, notebooks out, listening intently. She sat right there with them. No robe, no official podium, just an Eleanor, the person behind the judge's bench, the woman who'd been behind the wheel. A young student in the first row put up her hand. Judge Vance, I must have watched that video 10 times. I just don't get it. How did you manage to stay so incredibly calm? Eleanor offered a small smile, but her eyes held a deeper, sadder wisdom. Because in a way, I've been getting ready for a moment like that my entire life, she told them. When I was about 16, my father sat me down. He said, one day someone will look at you and only see a reason to be afraid or to be angry. It won't matter what you've accomplished or what you're wearing, but in that moment you have to decide who you're going to be. You can choose to protect your pride or you can choose to protect your life. The room became completely still. Another student then asked, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently? Eleanor paused for a moment. No, she said finally, but I truly wish I didn't have to be flawless just for people to believe me. Soft sounds of agreement went through the room. One young woman quietly wiped a tear from her eye. A young man nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting a long time to hear someone say those words out loud. Eleanor went on, "You always hear people say, just comply. But what happens when you do comply and you're still doubted, still made to feel threatened? What do you do then? What are you supposed to tell your kids? What do you even tell yourself?" She looked around, making eye contact with almost every student there. "I'm not here looking for pity. I'm here because staying silent only helps the people who are doing wrong."